Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Marco Argenti. Marco is the Chief Information Officer of Goldman Sachs, a multinational investment bank and financial services company that earns roughly $60 billion in annual revenue. He's a member of the Management Committee, the Firm-Wide Technology Risk Committee, the Firm-Wide Client and Business Standards Committee, and the Firm-Wide Enterprise Risk Committee. And he joined the company in 2019 as a partner of the firm. Prior to his time at Goldman Sachs, he spent roughly 6 years as the Vice President of Technology of Amazon Web Services, or AWS, overseeing all aspects of the product lifecycle of cloud services, including strategy, business planning, and developer engagement. I look forward to hearing more about his journey from one of the premier digital native organizations to one of the older and more storied investment banks, and learning more about the journey and pathway he sees ahead for Goldman Sachs. Marco Argenti, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Peter, it's such an honor to be here today.
You're kind to say that. Well, let's talk a bit about Goldman Sachs, an organization that doesn't need much introduction, but one that even in your short tenure has gone through some pretty remarkable changes in terms of its own direction and businesses it's getting into. Talk a bit, if you would, just in brief about an overview of the business that you're in.
Yeah, so obviously, like you introduced gracefully, Goldman Sachs is definitely one of the most prominent financial institutions in the US and then worldwide. But importantly, and this is kind of what attracted me in the first place, is an organization that has always tried to be at the forefront of innovation and try to anticipate changes in the industry and technology, and I think that's kind of in the DNA of the firm, to try to be nimble, to try to be smart, to try to be anticipating trends. I guess the technology part of Goldman Sachs is something that over the years have actually evolved from being, let's say, a support function like it historically was in many financial institutions, in something that actually becomes a product for their customers, with the recent announcement that we made. I can go more in details on that, but also really like as one of the ways that we create competitive advantage over the others. So technology first approach is something that you heard our CEO, David Solomon, say many things. And I think I'm part of that plan. And that's what ultimately attracted me to join the firm.
That's very interesting. And talk a bit about, you began to allude to it, and I'd just love to double click a bit more on your role as Chief Information Officer. Can you talk a bit about your purview in that role?
Yeah. So I lead the engineering organization, which is a bit more of than 12,000 people, mostly developers, and what we call strats, which are essentially our quantitative engineers that work on models and also work on the technology behind that. The role really of a CIO, I mean, classically is really to try to keep the firm safe, to make sure that the firm has the systems to support their business and its growth. But I think in this case, I think my role is a role of digital transformation, is a role of actually cultural transformation, first and foremost within the engineering organization. So I mean, to kind of set the stage right now, and I started to see this when I was at AWS, where I was serving a lot of customers, which were large multinational companies going through a rapid change in the technology landscape, leading to the need of kind of upskill their technology and upgrade their technology, but also kind of think technology in a different way. I came to appreciate how difficult it is for companies to go through that transformation, and also on the other side, how much reward there can be when those transformations are successful. In a world that is more and more complex, in a world that is more and more data-driven, in a world that obviously where profound changes and 100 years events are almost like right now happening on a daily basis, which is the world where we live, the ability to really understand and have a good model of your data sources, the way you can pick up signals that maybe might not be picked up by others, is of fundamental importance in order to drive your overall strategy as a firm. The journey that really we started to embark as a CIO organization is a journey that really hinges on three main pillars of transformation. One is around the people. really around the idea that any company, but especially in our industry, needs to master technology at least as well as a technology company. So we can't take a discount because we are not in technology. Technology now is at a point that you need to be as good or better than anybody else, regardless of the industry. So there is a people aspect, being able to attract the best of the best, being able to make sure that you're really giving these people the opportunity to do their best work within an organization like ours. The second pillar is about how do you make sure that those people are actually working effectively, they're working together, they're working on something that is aligned with the business objectives and the strategy. And so it's what we call mechanisms, i.e., a way to build software that really works backwards from the customer and really follows a pretty rigorous process to try to understand the business objectives before you actually write the first line of code. And then the third leg of the strategy is trying to reverse the paradigm of the bigger you are and the slower you go, which is, I'm sure, something that you heard before, to the bigger you are, at least you are at the same speed, but possibly you can actually get faster, which is something that I experienced very clearly in AWS, that actually started to release more and more products and faster as they were getting bigger, which is, sometimes you can call it the technology flywheel, where anything you build can be used by others to build on top, therefore reducing the build time. So those three strategies, excellence in people and rigorous but customer-focused mechanisms and scalable platforms, is kind of a magic triad that I think is really behind the strategy that we're trying to implement as technology leaders at the forefront of digital transformation.
Well, you described for good reason, Marco, why you were excited about this opportunity, and the description you have of those three pillars, which I'd love to cover in a bit more detail, are remarkable and very much emblematic of what one might expect to hear from a digital native organization and a tech first organization, if you will, a sort of typical, like an Amazon, for example, where you once worked. Yours is an organization that was founded in 1869. And I wonder if you had any misgivings or concerns before joining. Obviously, a prestigious bank and a premium brand, but nevertheless, one born well before the digital age, more than a century before the digital age. And so I wonder if were there any misgivings you had about how quickly you could realize a vision like the one you just described?
I've worked with big transformation projects with customers of AWS, and I know it's change is difficult. I mean, anything that especially goes at the core of an established culture, especially in a very successful company, it's something that is almost intrinsically hard to change. And in fact, that was kind of my biggest worry coming in, which is, okay, I'm not going in for a turnaround because Goldman Sachs is actually extremely successful, and so how does a successful company embrace change as opposed to resist change? I have to say that if the leadership has the foresight to see that no matter how successful you are in the current context, there could be a change of context due to externalities, which we can talk about, which will change the landscape and shift the table and then paradigms, then you need to be open to change by definition. And that's kind of what was in the agenda of David and Solomon and John Waldron, who are the people that hired me, which I actually found extremely open to change, but also with a pretty distinct challenger mentality, which is, in this world, you need to adapt in order to be successful. And there are a lot of external disruptors that are coming our way. One is, again, like I said, the increasing complexity of the business, the increasing reliance on data, the competitive pressure from new entrants, from fintech entrants, from technology companies, from other banks, which is intensifying, changing in the political landscape, extreme upgrade of the threats from a cyber standpoint. So there's almost like a perfect storm of change. And technology is often the answer for that because it's something that you can generally adapt and deploy with a certain speed. Other things are more difficult to change. Fortunately, we're 100% digital. And software tends to be more malleable than metal, or than, if we were producing airplanes or anything like that. And so being a complete 100% software organization with essentially no bricks and mortar and just people and software, I think we are in a good position to be open to change. And so I think my fears, which are obviously you hit it in the head, is something that is always a concern, especially for someone coming from a different industry, like I was, with very little prior knowledge of the financial services industry. It's something that obviously I asked myself quite a bit, but it was the openness and also like the profound transformation agenda of the leadership that really helped a lot. I have to say, I have many colleagues, ex-colleagues, or people in the tech industry that moved to other industries. And we can talk about that a little bit more also, because I love the fact that what's happening at Goldman is happening in many other industries. And some of them were not as successful. And if I look at the pattern, not that we're successful yet, but I'm saying some of them were more successful than others. We're really trying very hard, to learn from that, and even to learn from our own mistakes and keep going forward in our transformation. A common pattern, a common failure mode is when you're not driving those changes from the top. Cultural transformation can only come and can only be successful when it's embraced at the highest possible level. You need to have your CEO with you. You need to have your board with you, and the board was extremely supportive. Otherwise, the headwinds can be, sometimes just too strong, because, as I said, any company naturally resists change, especially a successful one. And so in this case, I really enjoyed I'm still enjoying full support from the leadership, which is really what got us to start peeling, all the layers of change, starting to introduce new mechanisms, starting to introduce new practices, starting to introduce new functions. I love to talk to you about some of the stuff that we introduced, and really starting to see the change happen.
Yeah, very interesting across the board. You're also, you note that you were new to the industry. Predecessors of yours had deep experience not only in the industry but at Goldman itself. The George Lee, Marty Chavez, other people who've held the title that you've had, who were with the organization for a long time. Obviously, I can only imagine it helped that you're coming from perhaps the most famous of the technology organizations, surely on the short list of the most famous technology organizations. But when you think about culture change, that really important first step that you described of the three legs of the stool, so to say, of your strategy, how did you feel about building that credibility with an organization in a context that you that wasn't sort of in your blood as yet? Talk a bit about that. Well,
first of all, being open about what I don't know is generally a good approach, because it kind of builds trust, and also being fairly opinionated on things that I've seen work, but being able to adapt. And so the listening part was, of course, a big ingredient, because this is a very complex business, make no mistake. But then there are patterns that are common, especially in engineering across various industries, which are something that you can abstract and you can apply. One of them being realizing the change of the role of the engineer within an organization, which used to be called an IT organization, and now it's really generally called a technology organization. But it's more like something that I've seen across automotive, across healthcare, across manufacturing, across oil and gas, and across also financial services, which is you can't have an engineering team that only talks about bits and bytes. They need to think about the why. One of the devices of change that we introduced was, in the first few months, was actually setting a series of tenets, which we call the engineering tenets, that are really the way we internalize this kind of change, and we try to express it in words, and we try to express it into a set of almost like proxies for when decisions are not clear. We call them the engineering leadership tenets. And the first one is what I was talking about, which is build with purpose. Build with purpose basically means start with the why. Do not just build. First of all, ask yourself, why should I build even anything? And by the way, a culture that tends to build everything And then you start asking, first of all, should I even build it at all? And by the way, should I build it in-house or should I use a vendor? And you start asking yourself almost like anti-engineering questions, because every engineer, they want to build. So if you even say, why should I build? It's almost like, you're immediately creating a little bit of tension, but it's really positive tension. And so starting from the why and the ultimate unifier between engineering and business is the client, because at the end of the day, the client will interact with your products, which are going to be built by engineers. And if the client those products are not good and the client is not happy, even worse, if the products are not fit for the purpose, then the business is going to suffer. So that's the ultimate intersection. That's where we start from. We made a pact with the engineering leadership and across our various businesses that let's take the most important projects, say 100 projects, large scale. And for each of them, let's apply the so-called working backwards process. So we write, like Amazon style, a PR and FAQ, we write a memo, we kind of adapted the process a little bit, and we ask ourselves the questions: who is the customer? What is the problem or opportunity that we're trying to solve or optimize for? What is the benefit for the customer once that's solved? How do we know that that's what the customer wants or needs? And then what will be the user experience? And until you answer those questions, we don't start building anything. And then we review those memos at the beginning of every meeting. We sit down, we read, and then we have a discussion. And I was actually surprised to see how, that's a big change, because imagine that the normal pattern is you have a bunch of highly opinionated people that love to present their PowerPoint, and it becomes a mix between content and performance, right? So it's kind of a performing art in a way. And I tell you that the engineers really loved the fact that you're really introducing mindfulness, thoughtfulness, and also inclusion in the process. Because people that, like me, obviously you can hear I'm not, I can barely speak English. And obviously I'm not a native speaker. Joking aside, people that historically had difficulties in expressing themselves in a different language, but they might actually have a lot to say, or people that have not such a strong personality, or maybe they are afraid to present, especially in front of senior management, etc. Often, almost always, people that are smart, they have great mental models, they can actually write it down, and they can write it down exceptionally well. And then when you read something, instead of seeing someone present, your brain switches into reading mode, which takes the aggressiveness down quite a bit, it takes the competition down quite a bit, and it gets into, okay, I really need to pay attention to this. And so when the discussion starts, the discussion is a world apart from where it generally is during the PowerPoint. Biggest pattern when you do a PowerPoint presentation is you ask a question, interrupt the person says, it's actually slide 23, give me a second, I'm going to go back there, or they interrupt the flow and the whole thing becomes messy. So now we do that not for every single meeting, but we do it for the most important things that we build. We instituted places like the platform steering group or the digital strategy team, where we bring business and technology people together. We go through that process. And I think that has been absolutely transformational. I would suggest that to any company, to the point that actually there are other companies, some of our clients, that come to us and they've asked us to kind of, coach them on the process. And we've started kind of implement that as, something that is almost like a common language between the people that we deal with. So that's one of the ways we do cultural change. So you kind of go back to first principle. Mm-hmm. You kind of go back to something that you've seen work across industries. And you try to establish tenets that people relate to, such as, that we value data-driven decisions, that, we want to inspire trust, that we want to build with purpose, that, we really look around corners. So things that are not obvious, but then they become central to the way people operate. And that's how you drive change. And that's kind of independent of the sort of a specific knowledge, because you always have a lot of domain experts. But then how do you actually make them deliver something that is great for the customer? And, and that's the way we chose.
Very interesting. Speaking of customers and that second pillar of building software that works backward from customer needs, the nature of the customer has been changing quite a bit, Marco, at Goldman Sachs. There's always been a B2C component to the business. One thinks of wealth management, for example, but the primary area that Goldman has been famous for is the B2B segment, the investment bank, and the investing done in M&A and so forth that's done within a corporate setting. In recent years, there's been much more of an emphasis on, I should say, a building emphasis, not taking over the B2B side, but on a different kind of customer, an individual customer. And I wonder how you think about, it strikes me actually in some ways you're very well positioned. It's kind of the reverse of Amazon, the company you once worked for that went from a B2C as the primary area of business to the part that you were a member of for more than half a decade in the B2B segment, AWS. And I wonder what learnings you draw from that and how you think about working back from customer needs for very different kinds of customers.
Yeah, that's a great question. Two things. One is it introduces a new customer persona in the mix in Goldman Sachs that wasn't one of the traditional clients that we used to serve, which is the developer. We've seen, and I've seen that for many, many years, that the growing importance of developers into decision making when it comes to adoption of B2B services. Okay, so really, there are so many examples out there of companies that have, including AWS, that have put a lot of investment into the developer experience, and that has been the key for adoption of services. So recently, we announced a new business for the firm. One of the main divisions called Platform Solutions, where we really kind of made a sort of a bold move to really create a segment of our business as it's all about externalization of our services with a B2B and a developer focus. And doing that has really, in a way, merged the incredible client orientation that Goldman has and has always expressed with the ability to serve those customers with technology in addition to financial and banking services. I think the offering that we kind of call financial cloud, it's something that is really about taking something that is really complex and really core to our business, but also to other companies' business, such as payment, for example, abstracting the complexity, which could be scale, could be regulation, could be operational complexity, etc., and offering it to our clients in the form of a service. Okay, and service, by the way, is very different than product. That's something that it takes decades to understand. Fortunately, we were able to attract many people in the recent years that have run services, and also. Goldman has been in the services business now for a long time. Marquee was created almost 10 years ago, and it's offered as a service. And most recently, transaction banking, which has been offering for a couple of years now to large corporate customers. Those are all services, and the difference between a product and service is something that some people ask me, how do I think about that? And generally, I like to exemplify that. By saying, okay, imagine that you need to prepare food, okay? So that's your product. If you cook for your family, then you have a product. If you open a restaurant, then you have a service, okay? Even if it's the same exact kitchen and the same exact food, but I tell you that restaurant has one purpose, which is to offer a level of service which is constant, which is innovative and rotating, but is also adheres to certain standards, has a certain predictability, has a certain capacity management. So that all thing that makes restoration such a hospitality, such a complex business, as opposed to just building a product. And it's like for us, building software is just the first step. It can be complex software, okay, like a complex recipe, but the problem is really operating that software with that meets certain service level expectations, which is really what customers are expecting to get out of that. And so back to the principle of building with purpose. And so for that, with the idea that really in this cloud businesses, what you're really selling is the abstraction of complexity. So think AWS. Many times AWS sells services that are based on open source software, but then adds this layer of management that actually abstracts a lot of the complexity of operating a service, such as uptime, alerting, patching, auto scaling, logging, the billing, and all those things that are so hard to manage. And so this is what we want to do with our platform solution, which is we take primitives, banking primitives, such as payments, such as loans, such as credit card, creation of ETFs, et cetera, and then you package them into services that have a very consistent way to be delivered to our customers. They offer through APIs, which are application programming interfaces. They target developers with a great developer experience. And at that point, I think whoever manages to do that for the complexity of our business or for any industry business, not just for the underlying IT layer, I think it has a tremendous potential in the year going forward. That's really, for me, one of the greatest transformations that I'm seeing, which is, hey, you know what? 10 years ago, we were thinking about how do you abstract the complexity of a database or compute, etc. Now you're actually thinking about the level above. How do you abstract the complexity of manufacturing? How do you abstract the complexity of finance? How do you, and all that, I think, has a potential for value creation that is really amazing. I can maybe just give you, if you want, a couple of examples of things that we do on that, because we started this journey. Now we kind of made it more into a single offering. But Marquee is our digital storefront where you have market insights, analytical tools, you have execution services, you have data services, and what also we launched last year for AWS called the Financial Cloud for Data. So basically services that are targeted to the trader, targeted to the chief investment officer, etc., like in this institutional nature. Transaction banking, which is, imagine, like is an offering for treasurers, CFOs, but is essentially a way to manage your payments and your cash balances in an incredibly efficient way, introducing elements of innovation like virtual accounts so that you don't have to keep money balances in all the accounts in the various countries, for example, or the various institutions you need to pay. So that is all offered native, cloud native through APIs, etc. Like the card origination, like card issuance, like we built the Apple Card, obviously, and the MyGM rewards card, doing it in a way that is not your classic white label card, but it is something that is completely customizable by the client so they can create an optimal user experience. The ETF acceleration. It takes generally 2 years to bring an ETF to market for anybody. There is so much complexity underlying, and we're aiming to do it to allow our clients to do it in weeks or months. So really cutting that time because we are abstracting a lot of that complexity and so on and so forth. So we already have a really nice set of primitives. There will be more to come. And I think, in my opinion, this is actually one of the most interesting aspects of that really exemplifies the transformation that we're going through.
You really highlight the virtue of this abstraction of complexity, which calls to mind that ironic or counter to expectation goal that you have of getting larger, and in the process of getting larger, getting faster and better. Contrary to most organizations, as you call out, of becoming more unwieldy and the whole analogy of a ship, right? As the ship gets larger, it's much more difficult to turn. And so having an organization that actually becomes increasingly nimble the larger that you get. I'm hearing you talk about the necessary ingredients in order to actually accomplish that. Are there any other aspects that you would call out as important in driving that possibility?
I think the importance of being nimble and agile and being able to react to change, and really the ability to also drive innovation. Because like I said before, the world out there is not static. Things change. Also, these new offerings are something that, we're kind of, somehow exploring new grounds, and in some cases is things that we've never done before at scale. And it takes a little while to build the muscle. So we really need to learn by talking to our customers, by being engaged with them, by kind of, making sure that we have appropriately set up our systems in order to support that. And I think that kind of leads to the third pillar, which is the platform. So anybody can, strategies are kind of free, right? You can read about the strategy. You're going to hear it on this podcast. You can, hire a consulting company that will tell you, there's a big opportunity in externalizing services. Okay, great. But then you cannot just wake up one day and just start externalizing stuff, because you can only do it if you have a solid foundation underneath. Otherwise, it's not going to scale. Might break, it might be taking longer than expected. And so I think that's why this strategy is only possible if the other elements that we talked about, i.e., we're confident that we have great technologists and we're able to attract and retain and grow our technologists team. And the other one, we have platforms underneath that are built for scalability, that are mostly, built cloud native. And they have data models that allow you to connect all the dots and not having to go very complex kind of batch type of transformation, which are so typical of classic IT. You kind of almost need like a real-time operating system behind all this that actually takes all the signals, brings them together, unifies them into a single fabric. That's kind of the prerequisite for being able to externalize services. And so, data is one of the lifebloods and big enablers of the strategy. We've been investing a lot in our data quality, in our data lineage, in our data platforms, the ability to abstract the complexity of data, how we represent, for example, a derivative, or how do we represent, a complex, option, or how do we represent trades, and how we going on and on and on. And we decided to, to take a fairly modern and standardized approach to that by creating a standard, which started internally. We used to call it Alloy. And then we eventually made the decision to offer as an open source project to the community through an institution called FINOS, which is the Financial Services Open Source organization. And in October 2020, we launched what we call now Legend. Think of that as a way to represent data in a standardized format, which is human readable and machine readable, which is extensible, so you can create new products. And then it's supported by a set of tools that allow non-technical people to create relationships between data, etc. And then it creates all the classes and all the methods and all the machinery in order to make that work in your applications. Why is that important? Because, at the end of the day, if we all talk different languages, and believe me, often you see even within the same firm or within the same company that you have groups that talk different languages, then you need to do translations. So when you do a translation, something gets lost. And then imagine the same thing happens outside. And so you have this incredible web of translations that then becomes really your limit to scalability. So we invested a lot to fix that internally. And now we kind of trying to, use it as a lingua franca among our partners so that we also have an ecosystem around it. And this idea of the financial cloud, imagine that is so crucial that who we talk to speaks the same language. And so we not only offer functionality, we also offer a semantic way to describe our products. We've also done it for digital assets. So we launched recently what we call Dataonomy, which is a classification system for the digital asset market that is designed to provide investors, service providers, developers, researchers, like a way to help to monitor market trends, to analyze portfolio risks, etc. So it is really like a data service, a data classification service. And I think this approach of having well-designed architectures of foundational platforms, and also have this overlay of highly curated data and data representations is kind of your prerequisite to then being able to offer those services to the external world. So it's a big build. It's something that we've been working on for quite a while. And, it's not easy, but I think, we have examples out there of companies that have done it successfully, in different contexts. And, we have examples of things that have been incredibly successful. So also within Goldman, like the XB, like the Apple Card. And we really want to build on that and build on that experience in order to really take it to the next level.
Yeah, great examples across the board, Marco. I appreciate you sharing those. I wanted to ask you, as somebody who's reached such heights across multiple gold standard organizations, as you reflect on your own career, what have been some of the difference makers for you on your pathway to success and accomplishment and executive roles? What are some of the opportunities that presented themselves, mentors who were there along the way, or other factors that you might call out as difference makers for you?
I guess, one of the best examples that I've ever got, and I don't necessarily need to mention from whom, but someone that I really respect is to try to be very, very aware of your own biases and always challenge your own biases. Because, that's kind of a little bit of a pattern. The more you get experience and the more you kind of, accumulate years of experience. So there is a good side of it, obviously. But the bad side is that your biases become so calcified and so, cemented that then, are very hard. It's very hard for you to actually see big changes coming. Okay. And so, if I look at my career, it's always been kind of trying to see, what are the big changes and big disruptors that are coming. And so, started many years ago when I thought that in a world dominated by desktop personal computers, etc., maybe the internet would bring something very new. And that was a long time ago, but that wasn't obvious when I did my first internet startups, and everybody was like, what the heck is that? And then looking at how that evolved into mobile. So I was running a mobile startup in the early 2000s, and I thought that at one point compute will eventually become ubiquitous, and you would have it, in any moment of your life, regardless if you're in front of a computer or not. And then came, the app revolution, and then, the idea of, of doing functionality on a phone. And then the cloud in 2013 was very attractive for me because I thought that, there was no way that the data centers will remain as a going concern, the same way as people don't run their own power plants. And now I'm seeing this, big evolution of abstraction of business complexity and really tech-led business organizations that I think is an absolutely incredible trend out there. So, so back to your question, I think the challenging of my biases, I could have sat on any of those steps and say, oh, this is going to be forever because that's what I know. And I always try to look at what I don't know. And really, this is what I tell people, especially like people that are at the beginning of their careers, which is trying to get out of your comfort zone. The comfort zone is pleasant, but eventually, the comfort zone, will kill you. And you need to be aware that you need to move out of your comfort zone in order to have to have awareness of what are going to be the challenges in front of you. And so, keep learning, being humble, trying to be aware of your surroundings, and then, when you have an instinct, why not follow it? Not be afraid of actually be wrong, because, in order to get out of your comfort zone, you need to have a conviction of some sort. And so just follow the conviction, knowing that at one point you can redefine what success looks like, or you can just admit that you're wrong and fail.
Great insights, Marco. Thank you for mining those for us. David Solomon, your chief executive officer, is famous about his passion for music. He's a DJ, and it will even apply his skills at major festivals. I understand you also are passionate about music and a practitioner as well. Talk a bit about your own exploits in music, if you would?
At a much smaller scale, of course.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy that kind of fame, but yeah. So I play in a band, a band called Element 47, and in fact now that band is in Seattle. Now I moved to New York, so I have a new band here called the Constructors. And we actually are going to have a show soon on the 14th of December at the Bauer Electric here in New York. But basically, we do it for charity because about 5 years ago, when I was just playing in the basement with a bunch of friends, one of those friends who was a tech entrepreneur was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he died a few weeks later in a pretty tragic circumstances. And so we decided to kind of dedicate our in a way, time and musical lack of talent, but let's say musical efforts to really raise money against pancreatic cancer. We started to play in various venues. We started to do shows, and I became board member of the Pancreatic Cancer Association called PanCan. We raised over $1 million actually so far for pancreatic cancer, which for music is not that bad, thanks to a lot of generous donors. But that's really a way for me to somehow nurture my passion, but also really trying to give back and do something good for others.
That's really wonderful. Well, Marco Argenti, thank you for a dynamic conversation representative of the remarkable work that you and your team are doing and the work that you've done across multiple organizations of consequence. It's been inspiring to hear more about your learnings and experiences in addition to your thoughts about the future of business. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us today.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's been great talking to you. Thank you.